Hey everyone, good morning. I'm up on the mountain this morning with this beautiful group of bighorn sheep, one of my favorite species to photograph, one of the very first species I began photographing as a new wildlife photographer years ago. I'm going to take you along with me today as I photograph these sheep. I'm going to let you know exactly what I'm thinking and doing and why I'm doing that as I photograph them, so you can see the images that I'm able to get. And if you're new to wildlife photography, this video is going to be great because it'll let you know what types of things you should be doing and considering as you photograph wildlife, as you go through that process of getting your first wildlife images. If you're a seasoned pro to wildlife photography, hopefully this video will give you some ideas or reminders of things that you should be considering as you photograph wildlife. Well, the sheep are right here. Let's quit wasting time blabbering and start photographing. Let's get to it. The very first thing that I look for when photographing any wildlife is their behavior or reaction to my presence. These bighorn sheep are extremely comfortable with me being up here on the mountain with them. Because of this, I know that I can move relatively freely around them without scaring them, disturbing them, or altering their behavior. This will allow me to position myself almost however I want if I see a photographic opportunity. Although these sheep are very comfortable with my presence here right now, I'm constantly on the lookout when photographing any animal for changes in behavior, signs of nervousness or discomfort with me being there. If I start to see those signs, I'm going to slowly back away and let them get comfortable with me again. Many species require a lot of time of you just sitting in one place nearby for them to get used to you before you can start repositioning or moving yourself to get the photos that you want. Always do what's in the animal's best interest, and I promise you'll get better images that way. Now that we've determined that these sheep are extremely comfortable with my presence here and that I can reposition myself however I need to get the images that I want, the next things that I'm going to consider are my background and light. A lot of photographers would tell you to switch those, and in some scenarios you would definitely want to do that. In this case though, I'm going to put my backgrounds before my lighting. Let me explain why. As I look over these sheep and the surrounding terrain, I'm looking for potential viewpoints for photos. If I were to photograph them from where I'm at right now, I'll be looking up at them with some dirt and grass as my background. As I look around, I see a mountain off in the distance to my left and more grass and rocks to my right. So why look at my background before considering the light in this scenario? If I were to position myself first based on light, I would move further up the mountain and be shooting down on the sheep, placing the sun behind me as it rises in the ideal spot. By doing so, the sheep would have excellent light on them, but my background would be fairly boring and my angle shooting down on them isn't one that I particularly like. Instead, I've got this mountain back here that I can use as the background, so I'm going to reposition myself accordingly, all the while keeping in mind where the sun is going to rise and putting that in the best position that I possibly can so I do have decent light to work with. Different scenarios will mean that I switch these priorities back and forth when positioning myself, but in this case, I'm going with backgrounds first. If I was photographing an animal and the background was relatively similar, 360 degrees around, then I would prioritize light. But in this case, where my mountain background is just a sliver and everything else is rocks and grass, I'm choosing the mountain over the light. If you do find yourself in a scenario where the light just isn't ideal or good to work with at all, there's some techniques and methods that you can use to really turn your photos around to be very creative and engaging to look at. I'll put a link to a video in the description below and you can check that out after we're done here if you're interested. Let's reposition ourselves now and get that mountain in the background. The sun's coming up and we should have some really fun light to work with here. As I repositioned myself, I saw an awesome photo opportunity using the light that was available to me. It wasn't perfect, vibrant light shining directly on my subject, but rather it was the opposite. Looking up, I saw a backlit ram. Using backlight will really make animal breath more visible and pop out in your images, so I capitalized on the opportunity at hand. It was just a fleeting moment, but what an amazing moment it was. Now that I was in position with the best background available and decent light, I got down on the sheep's eye level and began to take my pictures. Getting down on the animal's eye level is a great way to make an image more engaging. Anytime you shoot down on an animal, it makes it look smaller to the viewer and you generally capture less of the background. It's not always possible to be on eye level, but by doing so when you can, you make the subject seem larger and more realistic. In short, it really adds a lot to the image. The sheep eventually moved out of the beautiful morning light and into a shaded, rocky area. I followed and was once again presented with some amazing opportunities in this new terrain with these new light conditions. Direct sunlight, especially right after sunrise and just before sunset, can really make your images pop with color. Shooting in overcast light or in the shade won't produce images with as vibrant colors, but you are able to shoot longer into the day by avoiding harsh light, and you're also able to avoid the hard shadows and contrasts you get with direct sunlight. I photographed the sheep in these rocks for some time and was very pleased shooting in the shade, as it allowed me to position myself however I wanted to get my desired images. So I was just photographing the sheep in these rocks up here. I had the camera up to my eye, and I saw something just out of the corner of my eye dart across my view, and I look over, and there is a long-tailed weasel peeking out from the rocks, just curiously checking me out. It's always so much fun to see these guys. I don't get to see them very often, so every time I do, I try to capitalize on that opportunity. I put the same principles that we've talked about today with these sheep into practice with the weasel. I got down a little bit closer to his view and was able to photograph him. It was just absolutely wonderful. He darted off pretty quick. He didn't stick around for long, but I got some pictures that I'm really happy about. Just so much fun. It's late enough in the year where his coat has turned white for the winter, and that's just always a special time to be able to photograph them. So much fun. Let's get back to these sheep. Let's talk for a minute about bokeh. As I position myself at eye level, I sometimes get even just a bit lower. By doing this, I can include some of the nearby foreground into my image. I really like doing this if there are fun colors that I can incorporate. I had a bighorn ram just in front of me and some scrub oaks, and by getting just a little bit lower and including the oaks in the foreground, I was able to get some fun colors along with the sheep. The leaves were far enough away from the ram where they blurred very nicely and weren't too distracting in the resulting images. Incorporating bokeh into your images can make for some really soft textures and give you some really pleasing colors, all the while isolating your subject, which will help draw the viewer's eye exactly where you want it to go. As I photograph any subject, I'm constantly going through this series of things to consider when taking pictures, always looking for fun backgrounds, colors, light opportunities, or other elements to include into my images. One of the most important aspects of wildlife photography is being able to anticipate what an animal is likely to do before it actually happens. That way you can take these principles that we've talked about today and put them to practice, make sure you're in the right position to get the image that you want before it actually happens. This brings us to possibly the most important part of wildlife photography, knowing animal behavior. This subject is one that deserves its own video, as there's a lot to it. Luckily, I have another video that goes over some great examples of knowing behavior and getting images as a result. I'll put a link to that video below. I've gotten some pictures so far today that I am so happy with. It has been amazing to be able to photograph these bighorn sheep in such a wide variety of different conditions and scenarios. By continually analyzing the different conditions that you have to work with, the different angles, by repositioning yourself, looking for those backgrounds, and utilizing whatever light you have to work with to come up with some fun images, you can really transform your pictures into something better. Now that the sheep are bedding down and we've got the pictures that we want, it's time to start processing them. I've got a video right here that goes over that process. I'll see you there. Thank you so much for following along this week. We'll see you next time.